Hey, fellow ishies, welcome back to the channel. It is time for episode 6, Death of a Powerhouse. The audit, or the effort, depends on which word you prefer to use. Let's get started. The timeline, the weapon, Robbie Tyson, the sealed evidence, the endless parade of experts, commentators, broadcasters, and professional quidnuncs who somehow manage to explain events despite possessing less information than the average houseplant. For the first month after Charlene's murder, most public discussion focused on the shooting itself. Eventually, however, I found myself asking a different question. What if the murder wasn't where the story began? What if the story began long before that? The deeper I dug into Charlene's final year, the more I encountered the same observation from people who knew her well. Nobody could point to a single moment when everything had changed. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match in the boardroom, no cinematic declaration of war against powerful interests. Instead, Charlene simply stopped cooperating. At first, that sounds insignificant. Then you realize how many institutions depend upon cooperation. One former employee described it perfectly. She stopped rubber stamping things. The comment lingered with me because of how casually it was delivered, as though approving questionable arrangements had become routine enough that questioning them now seemed unusual. The further I looked, the stranger things became. Charlene had originally supported many of Veritas Meridian's international projects. She defended them publicly, promoted them enthusiastically, raised money for them. Yet somewhere along the way, her enthusiasm began giving way to curiosity. Curiosity became skepticism. Skepticism became investigation. And investigation, as history repeatedly demonstrates, rarely improves anyone's popularity. The breakthrough came from a collection of notes Charlene had apparently kept for herself. No official records, not company files, personal notes. The sort of material people create when something feels wrong, but they cannot yet explain why. At first, the pages seemed unremarkable. Dates, names, meeting summaries, fragments of observations. Then I noticed a pattern. Certain names appeared repeatedly. Different projects, different departments, different purposes, same names. The more I read, the more a curious sense of betweenity emerged. Charlene seemed caught between two realities. One version of events was the public explanation everyone accepted. The other consisted of patterns she could see, but couldn't yet prove. Then I found a note that changed everything. Written in the margin of the project report were 7 words. Griff says these groups aren't connected. That hardly seemed revolutionary until I turned the page. Another note. Same consultants, same directors. A third note appeared several weeks later. Why did Griff tell me otherwise? I sat back in my chair because that wasn't a financial question. It was a trust question. Somebody had told Charlene something. Charlene checked. The information wasn't true. And once that happens, a person begins reevaluating everything. I found confirmation in a series of text messages exchanged between Charlene and Griff nearly 11 months before her death. The conversation began innocently enough. Charlene, hey, quick question. Griff, those are never quick. Charlene, you said the consulting groups connected to the Valcrane projects were separate. Griff, they are. Charlene, then why do they share directors? There was no response for several hours. Eventually, Griff replied, "Probably coincidence." Charlene answered almost immediately, "How many coincidences am I allowed before they become patterns?" That line stayed with me, not because it proved corruption, because it revealed how Charlene's mind worked. Most people encounter explanation and stop looking. Charlene encountered an explanation and started checking. The more she checked, the more uncomfortable people became. Former employees described meetings where executives suddenly grew guarded whenever Charlene entered the room. Consultants who once spoke freely became cautious. Certain conversations moved behind closed doors. Questions that once received answers now received delays. One source told me that Charlene's greatest offense was not discovering secrets. It was refusing to stop asking about them. That was also when I first heard a phrase that would haunt the investigation: narrative management. I had a source that had worked briefly with Griff's operation before leaving. When I asked him about it, "What do you mean?" He laughed, not happily. The sort of laugh produced when a person realizes they've spent years participating in something they no longer understand. "People think the business is information," he said. "The business is deciding which information matters." That sentence gave me the collywobbles. Because once you hear it, certain things start rearranging themselves. The synchronized outrage, the identical talking points, the broadcasters who all seem to discover the same opinions on the same day. Perhaps coincidence, mayhap, or perhaps something else. By this point, Jake Fife had become increasingly frantic on air. The man reacted to ordinary questions with the desperation of a whittle, discovering everyone else received the joke before he did. Whenever guests mentioned Valkyrie, foreign influence, or financial relationships, Jake practically launched himself into the conversation. Then he would inevitably look toward Griff. Always Griff. The pattern became difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, Charlene continued documenting everything: names, dates, organization, connections. Not because she planned to expose anyone, but because she no longer trusted what she was being told. Then I found a note that truly changed my understanding of the entire case. It wasn't attached to a contract. It wasn't hidden in financial records. It appeared on a yellow legal pad alongside an ordinary meeting agenda. The handwriting was unmistakably Charlene's. "The audit won't tell me anything." Beneath it she had written, "They already know what it will find." I stared at those words for a very long time, because if Charlene believed that, then the audit was never an investigation. It was a performance. A carefully managed piece of jiggery-pokey designed to reassure everyone while revealing nothing. Suddenly, the audit itself seemed almost irrelevant. What mattered was what happened next, because beneath those sentences, Charlene had written one final note, a note that appeared underlined 3 separate times. "Need my own file." Not the company's file, not the auditor's file, her file. The source later confirmed it. She called it the insurance folder. "Insurance against what?" I asked. The answer came so quickly it sounded rehearsed. "Against being called crazy." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then the source added something I haven't been able to forget. Toward the end, she stopped worrying about money. What was she worried about? The source hesitated. People. After the call ended, I returned to Charlene's notes. Tucked inside the final page was a list of names. Griff's name appeared. Eric's name appeared. Several executives appeared. One government official appeared. The final name had been circled so many times the paper had nearly torn through. Beside it, Charlene had written 6 words. "This is where Valkyrie really begins." And for the first time since her death, I stopped wondering what Charlene had discovered. I started wondering what was hidden inside the insurance folder. Because whatever it contained, Charlene trusted it more than the audit. And she trusted it enough to keep building it after she realized someone had lied to her. Well, that's it for episode 6. We're getting close to the end. So who do you think did it? Was it Griff King? Was it Jake Fife? Was it somebody else? Was it Eric, her husband? Was it Velcrane, a country somewhere that was using Veritas Meridian as a money laundering scheme? Guess we'll have to wait and see. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help the channel, and then you'll get notified when episode 7 drops. See you next time.